Yes, good day from Australia, mainland, West Australia state, Perth. Michael Moss, independent Tasmanian tiger searcher researcher since 1995 on mainland Australia. Headline, Dingo wrongly blamed for extinctions. I recently put up a video on YouTube here, you can see it obviously on here. And I forgot to mention two things. Number one, the dingo theory, which is basically, which we'll go into now. And also, the video that I put up was about some rock art found recently. And the gist of it is it's dated. The rock art's dated at 1,000 years or younger. And the reason why, and I forgot to mention this stupidly in the video, covered everything else, was that the pigment they used, white pigment or whatever, has only been used in more recent times to draw the cave drawings. And the theory, the speculation is, from the professor behind this detailed study, was that, and others, was that it's possible they were drawing what they were seeing, and that the Tasmanian tigers were alive, up until then. Okay. And by the way, 1998, I've got no doubt a video one in South Gippsland, so I can confirm that they've hung on, whether they were introduced or remnant. And this is more today about remnant. Now the theory is, on the Tasmanian tiger on the mainland, it was wiped out. Very famous theory, popular. It was wiped out when the Aboriginals introduced these dingoes, wild dogs from Indonesia, I think Asia, and from the top of Australia down. Okay, from the top down, they spread these animals and across. Now, if you look at Tasmanian, the real hotspots, there are alleged sightings elsewhere, but the real hotspots at Tassie tiger sightings is right along the bottom of Australia. South Gippsland, where I visited one. East Gippsland, even metro area, outskirts of some areas of Melbourne, which is southern Australia. Right along Otway's alleged sightings, Portland catchment, southwest Victoria, along the bottom there. Over to the southeast, South Australia alleged sightings of thylacine, going back decades. And 100 years in the case of, over 100 years in the case of South Gippsland, and also southwest West Australia, also along the bottom. So that sort of corresponds that maybe you would assume that the holdout area would be the furthest away of the holdout for the survival of thylacine. That they survived the dingo, if the dingo theory was right, that it would be right along the bottom of Australia, the furthest away from where the introduction occurred. Okay. So, but the problem is, in South Gippsland, for instance, not so much now. I don't think there's any dingoes. I'm pretty sure there isn't. In East Gippsland there's dingoes, and in the Great Dividing Range I'm pretty sure there's dingoes right across Gippsland. But in South Gippsland, and they were documented, there were, before, early settlers saw dingoes in South Gippsland. And Wilson's Prom, there was dingo footprints found, and I think they said there were dingoes there. So there were dingoes, they did reach that far down, which sort of suggests, well, if they reach that far down, the dingo, well, it's sort of cast doubt on the dingo theory. So I had an open mind to it, given what I've just told you about where I videoed a tiger, and it's the furthest point away, and all these other hotspots. I mean, there have been other sightings, in northern New South and Queensland, etc. But the real heavy hotspots have been across the bottom. And where I videoed it is about half an hour, 40 minutes drive from Wilson's Promontory, the southernmost point on mainland Australia, Wilson's Promontory National Park. You can see my other videos for all of this now. Dingo wrongly blamed for extinction, September 10, 2013, University of Adelaide. Dingoes have been unjustly blamed for the extinctions of the Australian mainland of the Tasmanian tiger or thylacine and the Tasmanian devil, a study has found. Now this is in the sciencedaily.com. This was a paper actually, it's a fairly old, but this sort of, I'm concentrating on this because of the recent breakthrough up north, of course. Okay. In a paper published in the journal Ecology, the researchers say that despite popular belief that the Australian dingo was to blame for the demise of thylacines and devils on the mainland about 3,000 years ago, in fact Aboriginal populations and a shift in climate were more likely responsible. Okay. And by the way, there's three options how the Tassie tiger got on the mainland. Remnant, introduced, or both. So dingoes could, by the way, they could have played a minor role. It doesn't mean dingoes didn't kill Tassie tigers, but just not wipe them out. So just remember that, okay, when you're hearing this. So you can have, it can be both, it can be quantum. It doesn't have to be one or the other, but this is a discussion on whether they wiped them, okay. I'll continue. Perhaps because the public perception of dingoes as sheep killers is so firmly entrenched, it has been commonly assumed that dingoes killed off the thylacines and devils on mainland Australia, says researcher Dr Thomas Prowse, Research Associate in the School of Earth and Environmental Sciences and the Environment Institute. There was anecdotal evidence too. Both thylacines and devils lasted for over 40,000 years following the arrival of humans in Australia. Their mainland extinction, about 3,000 years ago, was just after dingoes were introduced to Australia, and the fact that thylacines and devils persisted on Tasmania, which was never colonised by dingoes. So that's another thing. Okay. However, and unfortunately for the dingo, most people have overlooked that about the same time as dingoes came along, the climate changed rather abruptly, and Aboriginal populations, our native peoples, in Australia, we're going through a major period of intensification in terms of population growth and technological advances. In other words, their weaponry got more advanced, I'm assuming. They tooled up as far as killing creatures. Okay. Right, now, the researchers built a complex series of mathematical models to recreate the dynamic interaction between the main potential drivers of extinction, dingoes, climate and humans, the long-term response of herbivore prey and the viability of the thylacine and devil populations. The models included interactions and competition between predators as well as the influence of climate on vegetation and prey populations. The simulation showed that while dingoes had some impact, growth and development in human populations, possibly intensified by climate change, was the most likely extinction driver. Our multi-species models showed that dingoes could reduce thylacine and devil populations through both competition and direct predation, but there was low probability that it could have been the sole extinction driver. Low probability, folks. Our results support the notion that thylacine and devils persisted on Tasmania not because the dingo was absent, but because human density remained low there and Tasmania was less affected by abrupt climate change, or changes. Okay, so there it is there. The study, an ecological regime shift resulting from disrupted predator-prey interactions in Holocene Australia, also involved Professor Corey Bradshaw, or professors, and Barry Brook from the University of Adelaide's Environmental Institute, and Professor Chris Johnson from the University of Tasmania. So they were involved as well. So there you go, folks. Very interesting. Now, of course, if Tasmanian tigers, which I believe were introduced between 1910 and 1915 on the mainland, the dingo was on the way out down in South Gippsland. You know, in that period, they were sort of getting pushed out by humans, etc., etc. Remember, the Strzelecki's was totally burned to the ground there at the turn of the century. There was nothing there, apart from a couple of gullies, one at Mount Worth as well. So, you know, the dingoes were, you know, so the timing of any introduction, just to add, would have been very good as far as if the theory was right, but it looks like it's wrong anyway. Okay, so that's very interesting. So that leaves it open for the remnant theory, folks. Now, there's two other things I want to quickly touch on. We've got yet another major discovery of a mammal species. And remember, one of the vital preconditions for the existence, okay? One of the vital preconditions for the existence of the Tasmanian tiger on mainland Australia is you have to have incompetent conservation departments. And do we have that? We have monopolies, job for life, public sector union dominated, based on time serving, accountable to themselves, lots of money going in, but it goes into wages. Just one thing, the federal government should stop handing money to the states. It's the state governments that dominate conservation in Australia. And what this federal government does, and it backfires on them big time, they just shovel the money, they give lots of money to the states without tendering it out to private and non-profit competition. They should do that immediately. Should have done. I've been banging on about all this for decades. They don't listen to me publicly as well in the media about getting competition in, etc. So they need to tender it out, because what's happening at the moment, unfortunately for the federal government, and it serves them right, both Labor and Liberal parties, so I'm not being biased to it, but it's just Labor in at the moment, but the Liberals have ignored this. They shovel the money out for threatened species management. The states stuff it up like everything else. The threatened species list grows bigger, and the federal government is the one responsible for collating the damage, the species, threatened species, which is an ever-increasing list, as you'd expect, and then they release it to the public, and the public points the finger at them, when it's really the states doing the damage, but have no sympathy for the feds, because they just tender it out and throw the money to the and they know what's going on, but they just couldn't give us stuff. So they need to, because they're worried about upsetting the lefties, about getting some non-profit and especially profit in the conservation. Okay, they don't want that. You know, it's not popular amongst the left set, and Labor has a left, and the Liberals, well, they just don't give a stuff about conservation enough anyway. So anyway, species keep popping up, folks, and you'll see in my other videos that, you know, there are species, and I'll put a link to a couple of the videos of species being on the mainland, right? And they keep popping up, and this is just another example here. A new quokka population has been spotted in the Perth Hills. Now, quokka is a very famous species here, right? The reason it's famous is that they're mainly restricted to an island, well, not anymore, but they're pretty well restricted to an island called Rottnest Island. And a lot of famous people like Djokovic, Federer, tennis players, and Nicolas Cage, Hollywood actor, they take their photos, selfies with these things. This animal's not far away now as being well known as the koala and the kangaroo in Australia. In recent years, it's really kicked along. They were known from southwest West Australia, okay? And this happened in 2024, this discovery, but I'll just show you where on a map here. Here's the, okay, now, I'll show you here. I live in the Perth metro area since the end of 2017. See this here, folks? That's the CBD of Perth. Half an hour's drive. You just go along Great Eastern Highway to get to this place. Go via the bypass. Okay, in 2024, okay, you just keep going. In 2024, they, and I'll go into it in a minute, they pinged quokkas here. Helena Valley catchment. Now, I had some cameras, by the way, later that year, and they beat me to it. I would have found it, probably. I had cameras up just above Helena Valley in another location, trail cameras. Now, I didn't ping anything. I ping lots of species up there, but not quokka, because I go through them for obvious reasons scientifically, very slowly to see what I've picked up. But I didn't pick up quokka, and I would have known about it. But yeah, this other group pinged it here, and well done to them. But once again, folks, the conservation, and you go to the conservation department about quokka here, right? This is the DBCA-WA, Department Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions. I've got other videos on what these idiots get up to, but anyway. And I don't think there are Tasmanian tigers in WA, by the way. I've always been, I don't know, gut feel says they're not. Could have been introduced and spread over, but that was genetically stronger on the east coast. Just a gut feel. Could be wrong, of course. But that's why I didn't have cameras up there for that. There's alleged sightings of a panther puma-like animal up there, so that's why near a place called Boyer, which is very close to the Helena Valley, that's where I had. And you'll see some of the footage of my trail cameras in my YouTube here. And you'll also see there was one footage of a creature crossing a track, which I couldn't explain, but it looked more like a possum with something on its back than a quokka. But you can make up your mind if it's a quokka. Maybe I did ping it without realising it was from a distance. Now, this is the department. Okay, the person, the monopoly in charge here, quokka, okay? Now look what they say here. Now, as I said, they're found on Rottnest Island and in the southwest. Okay, here we go here. Distribution, this is the department. This is your department here, West Australians. Okay, distribution, you see that here? That little dot there's Rottnest Island, the darker dot. and that is, and there's a board island off the coast of the southwest, and the southwest on the mainland where they're seen. Right, and Perth is above Rottnest. Well, Perth is virtually where Rottnest is. There's nothing there. Have a look at this. At the time of European settlement, the quokka was common in the southwest of West Australia, where it still is. It's not as common anymore, but fossil evidence suggests that it has always been restricted to this region and to Rottnest and Board Islands, but while numbers on Rottnest Island remained high, mainland populations, as I said, declined so severely in the 20th century that by 1960 it was known only from a few isolated populations in swamps south of Perth. So it was found south of Perth, okay, which is the capital city of Western Australia state and mainland Australia. This is this model, right? The current distribution of the quokka includes Rottnest and Board Islands and at least 25 sites on the mainland, including 2 People's Bay, nature, mainly western. I won't go into all of them, but they're in the southwest, okay, nowhere near Perth, okay? Now, no fossil record, no fossil evidence that they've been in the Perth Hills, okay? But I'm going to go to the article where it shows they've been photographed in the Perth Hills. Got to be careful, folks. Just because there ain't fossil evidence, Australia's fossil, I've read in more than one location, fossil evidence, it's pretty, compared to other countries, it's not as prolific. So you can't rule out creatures just because there isn't fossil evidence in an area. And this is another example of it. Mind you, I did speculate in another video, leadbeater's possum, which has popped up after 200, well, since white settlement recently, and in New South Wales, mainland Australia, that there was a remote possibility they were introduced, okay, from Victoria to New South Wales where they found it, which is highly doubtful. They found in the middle of nowhere, basically. I don't want to say that in country areas, but it was up in the snowy mountains, so I don't think that happened. But there's a real possibility here that some wags have taken some and just deposited them, because it's so close to the metro area. That's more likely, well, it's more likely an explanation in leadbeaters, but it may not be actually, that these creatures here in the Perth Hills, half an hour, virtually the metropolitan area, very outer metro area of the capital city, have been sitting there undetected by the Conservation Department for, 100 years since its existence. National Parks and Wildlife. So we'll go into it. We'll go just quickly. A local organisation, it wasn't the government that discovered this, by the way, no way, not those hacks. A local organisation has discovered a new quokka population on the WA mainland. The discovery was made by Aboriginal-led charity Bibble Ngama Aboriginal Association, BNAA, as part of the Burraful Barbilia program, an initiative aimed at improving the health of local waterways through community and cultural engagement. Volunteers identified the quokkas during a conservation audit assessment, assessing the health of the Mandoon Bilma Helena River catchment. As reported today by National Indigenous Times, this is the first time that the general public has photographed quokkas. It's the first time. There's no fossil record up there, according to the hacks in the department. Okay, famously, as I said, associated with Rottnest Island, quokka populations are also known to exist in the south, west and great southern forests. Previous in these areas were Dingo, yeah, I mentioned that for various reasons. While extensive research has been done on Rottnest Island's quokka population, beloved by tourists, locals and even celebs, as I mentioned, less is known about mainland quokkas. Well, they don't even know where they are. It's ridiculous. Edge of the Perth metro area. So I'm being generous in saying they could have been introduced. They most likely haven't, given that there are creatures popping up everywhere. You know, this is since white settlement, folks. Discovery of these quokkas demonstrates the importance of community-led programs. Well, it also demonstrates that you shouldn't have state government monopolies. It needs to be opened up, and they need to tender everything out, including these state governments, before they give it to their own staff. They need to tender everything out to private and non-profits. There's enough expertise out, well, there has been for decades, and they should have been doing it for decades. Maybe they had to listen to me, but anyway. Okay, I'm not going to go all through all that. I'll put a link to this. We hope this important discovery will help to strengthen, this is the group that found it, will help to strengthen efforts to protect mainland quokkas and other threatened native species that are under constant threat from land clearing fires, feral predators and our changing climate. And they also forget to mention state government conservation monopolies. That's the biggest threat, because their lack of innovation has weaponised for decades the intensity of the fires, the intensity of the feral predators, etc., etc. Don't take my word for it, folks. Get around Australia, like I've done with the farming communities, and ask their opinions at Parks Victoria and these various national parks and wildlife, and also conservation departments, state governments around Australia. Okay, I acknowledge the huge effort of our volunteers, including Tim Blake, who has purchased fauna cameras and dedicated many volunteer hours. So there you go, folks. Quokka, right here. There's the photo. Half an hour from Perth. Probably since white settlement, unless some wags have introduced some up there. Probably from the southwest. I don't know if they could get them off on a boat. Mind you, there's a lot of people moor their boats. It's a very wealthy area. It's based on mining, West Australia. They could have just, captured some on the Rock Nest, which is more unlikely. You got to doubt they've introduced them. I think mind you, as I said, there's more chance here, than there is the lead beaters. So that's basically it, folks. Yet another species found on the mainland. The dingo theory is got holes in it. And by the way, on the Aboriginal community, now, white man, since white settlement, mainland Australia has the worst extinction record on planet Earth. But it can't be the Aboriginal community, time and again, had a role. In scientific papers it says they had a role in the extinction of the megafauna. And here we have as well with the dingo, that, as you would have heard me read out, that these are also saying the Aboriginals had a role in wiping out Tasmanian tiger and the Tasmanian devil. So they're not guilt-free either, the Aboriginals, in taking out wildlife. Not in the industrial scale of the evil white man when it comes to the environment. And I love being white. I don't have any problems with that. But what I'm saying, I'm just joking. So anyway, the search goes on. It's getting very, very interesting on mainland Australia, because obviously in the last couple of months, the remnant theory is kicking in. And I thought I'd just go through all of this, and more species are popping up that shouldn't be, which backs up what I've been saying for decades on the mainland, that they haven't been doing enough mammal surveys. And all of these species coming out, being found, it's ridiculous, but it's what you'd expect from monopolies. Thank you.